Many thanks for staying tuned. It's still the conversation here on Lagos Television. Now, education stakeholders in the education sector and Nigerians generally are getting worried over the standard of education in Nigeria. Um, who should take the blame for this? Should it be the student? Should it be government? Should it be parents? Or everyone has a role to play here, or everybody has a share of the blame when it comes to standard of education in Nigeria? So on the conversation today, I'd like to take a look at what do we need to do to improve the current standard of education in Nigeria. We have a guest in the studio this morning. He is an expert educator and Nigeria Digital Education Reforms Advocates. Join us this morning as a welcome, Sulaimon Olalekan Okewole. Thank you for being here on the program today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right. Because you are an expert in this sector, and of course you're also one that is very passionate about reforms when it comes to the education sector, perhaps through some kind of findings or some kind of back-end information that you have at your fingertips, can you take us through what you think could actually be the problem and how we got to where we are at the moment?
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers. As we all know, education is the bedrock of every society. It's only unfortunate that we are where we are now because we haven't paid so much attention to our education system. Everyone has a role, everyone has a responsibility, and it's not just about blaming the government or blaming the students or blaming the parents or blaming the teachers. Like I said, it's a shared responsibility. We can be better. Now, you asked the question, you said, how did we get here? Because it wasn't like this, right? There used to be a time when we prioritized education.
Right.
But we no longer do that. We prioritize other things now. Maybe if we look back and we retrace our steps, then we can get it right again.
Okay, so sorry, a follow-up, Jibola, will be, I mean, you did say that we. So it will take me back to the fact that everyone has shared responsibility, like you said. So if we're tracing back, to what extent are we tracing? And if we also break down the we, who are the we? Again, everybody has a role to play. So if we're to say, okay, we, is it the parents? Is it the teachers? Is it government? Who exactly are the we?
Okay, thank you. When it comes to education, everybody is a stakeholder.
Okay.
The students are stakeholders, parents are stakeholders, government is a stakeholder, the community, wherever the school is established.
Okay.
So that's the we. Everyone is a stakeholder. So you cannot ignore anything when it comes to education. You cannot ignore any party or any group.
Okay.
You understand?
Right.
Then you said, how far back can we go? Particularly, let me just keep it precise. The trajectory of education has fallen badly since 2020.
Okay. So we have a timeline.
Exactly.
We can work between 2020 and now.
And now, exactly.
Okay.
And it's not just education that's affected. The COVID era affected almost every sector.
Okay.
But if you look at other sectors, there has been some reforms, there has been some changes that has happened. But education seems to have been ignored.
Okay.
So maybe we expect things to just
Pick
change
up
overnight.
on its own.
It will not pick up on its own.
Right.
Because education affects people directly. So we are dealing with people. We are not just dealing with a system or items that we just believe, okay, we change. No, we are dealing with people.
Right.
So we have to mold them. We have to rebuild them. We have to rejig our system.
Okay.
To get it right.
Okay, talking about rejigging our system, we cannot shy away from the fact that government, be it at the federal, state, or local government, they have the major role to play in all of this. And over the years, you would have noticed that the allocation of what we allocate to education is quite low. UNESCO said we should allocate 26% of our annual budget. But when you look at the annual budget of states and even the federal government, it is always a paltry sum. So is this also a major factor affecting the quality of education that we have in the country?
Thank you very much. Yes, it is. If we look at the 2025 budget, just about 7% is allocated to education. Although some may argue that that is a huge increase compared to what we had in the 2024 budget, because that's about 133% increment. But it's still not enough. We cannot allocate 3.5 trillion or so to education and expect that it will boost our education system to where we desire. So budgetary allocation for education is low. And we would see that people in the official, or let me say political offices, would rather prioritize capital projects, physical projects, roads, and the like, than allotting enough budget to education. I don't see why we do this, but it's important that budgetary allocation to education is increased. That's important. Also, apart from budgetary allocation, there are other things that we need to do. We have shortage of teaching staff in this country across all levels. If you go to some schools, you will be appalled at the situation there. So we need more teachers, and not just bringing teachers on board. We need to train them, because
Professional teachers.
Professional teachers, yeah. We need to train them. If you look at the medical field, for instance, or law, you don't joke with personnel there. They are trained personnel. Why is it that education, we see it as a last resort? So maybe when somebody doesn't find a job, you just delve into being a teacher.
Without having the interest to teach.
Having the interest to teach. So, and it happens, okay, let's say this happens. What about retraining them? There are professional courses. There are university courses that they can be enrolled for. So it's important that we look at training, employing more hands and training them.
Right. Okay, so, I mean, from what you've said now, let's also begin to see if we're able to apportion, to everyone their own blame, because again, we cannot move forward if we do not know where we're coming from. And so COVID era is where we're tracing our missteps from at the moment. Let's start from the doorstep of the government. Ajibola raised a very vital issue, and that is funding. And issues around budgetary allocation has remained. Sometimes it rises yearly, sometimes it falls yearly, sometimes it's stagnant yearly. And so for every government that is passionate about education, funding is key. So let's begin to look at how government can retrace their steps when it comes to proper funding. Now, there's funding and there's proper funding.
Yeah,
so how do we ensure that there is proper funding of education, starting from the UBEC fund, and that is starting from the primary education, because again, we do know that the foundation is key. And so if we do not also pay premium attention to primary education, what do we build on? So let's look at proper funding from not only the federal government now, because again, sometimes we look at the federal government and we, again, pat the state and the local governments on the back. So let's look at the role of government and ensuring that there is proper funding in the education sector.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. I want to make a statement so that it doesn't seem like we, as I've said, we're patting some people on the back. Government has a role. Federal government has a role. State governments have a role.
The
local governments have a role.
Right.
Private organizations have a role. Because if you look at our education structure, we have, in fact, we have
more private
schools. So if we focus our torchlight on the government alone, what happens to the private school?
Right.
So how do they, because we have a system where whether you go to private school or you go to public school, you meet
definitely
somewhere.
somewhere.
Exactly. So there should be an equilibrium.
Right.
There should be a
balance. So the
balance.
balance is not there.
The balance is not there.
Right. But government should actually be the regulator of the private sector.
Yes.
So meaning that government is also, are we saying that government is also not doing the very needful at ensuring that there's a balance?
I must commend the Lagos State government, because when it has to do with education, the Lagos State government is doing a lot.
Okay.
The quality assurance system that the Lagos State government has put in place is rarely found in other states.
Okay.
The federal government needs a system like that. Every other state needs a system like that.
Okay.
So that you don't just put the system, you also monitor the system.
Okay.
You ensure, of course, there are policies. We don't have a problem of policy. There are policies, but we have to ensure that these policies are doing what we ask them to do. So we also need more private bodies. You know, we have the PPP system when it comes to infrastructural building.
Right.
We also need so in education, PPP. Private bodies will come, team up with government. Yeah, so that we can, you know, level up.
Okay. Right.
Okay, Abimbola raised something earlier, which is the foundation, and she did say that you cannot build something on top of nothing.
Exactly.
The primary school is very, very germane, and of course the local government is in charge of that. But when you look at the quality of our primary schools today, they are appalling, and people, hardly can you see any sensible parent sending their children to public schools. In other climes, we have public schools, and we see the standard. Is it that government is deliberately killing our public schools? Because some of them have investment in some of these private schools.
Okay, thank you. Again, government needs to do more. But it's not just about government. If we look at our teachers across all level, look at our teachers that have the responsibility to deliver. Some of them have their own private schools where they ensure quality. They know what should be done, and they are doing it. But when it comes to the public infrastructure, we have, unfortunately, we have a way of mishandling or manhandling public infrastructure. Then, again about raising the standards from the basics. We need a curriculum reform in this country. We need, if you go to the schools, if you look at the curriculum we use, these curriculum, or these curricula, as the case may be, have been in use for several years. And we need to understand that the world is changing.
Right.
So we need to change with the world. We want to build an education system that meets up with global standards. So if we are not changing regularly, how do we meet up? And that's why when I refer to the COVID year, if we look at, I want to use JAM as a reference point.
Okay.
If we look at some other exams, there has been several reviews, changes. But you understand that JAM has remained what it was. And we expect that things will just change. No, things will not just change. We need to make them change. You change the system. You hardly change the people. You change the system as time goes on. Because, of course, we are living in a dynamic world. We are not static.
Okay, if our system is stagnant now, then what's the essence of appointing commissioners of education, ministers of education? Apparently, they have not been doing anything.
Well, they have a responsibility. They have a mandate to deliver. So they are doing something, but maybe they are not doing enough. So we require them to do enough.
Okay.
Let's get in. If you notice, there was a minister of education when this government came in. There is another minister of education now.
Yeah.
If you look closely, you will see the difference.
Right.
That is it.
So does that mean that it's also very important the kind of personalities or the kind of people that you put in positions, because they can make or mar that sector, and they can, you know, decipher whether or not there is a future for that sector or not. There's this saying that you put a round peg in a round hole or a square peg in a square hole. So how important really is that for government to ensure that everything is not about politics, especially when it comes to the education sector?
Thank you very much. Yes, education sector should not be toyed with. It should not. It's not a political office. We have to put professionals, people who have the track records, people who know what they are doing, and people who have the vision to take education forward. Because if we appoint people to offices just for political reasons or for political benefits, we cannot get desired results. So what we get is the political results.
Okay.
Because, of course, politicians are often focused on the next election.
True.
Yeah. So they want to appoint people to offices, people who can give them the numbers that they would need.
Okay.
But what we need in the education sector is not the number. We need people with vision. We need visionaries. We need people that can drive the quality of education forward because we need to meet up with global standards. Okay,
in this age and time, how do we achieve meaningful quality kind of education that we desire in order for us to compete globally now? We mentioned primary school the other time. I can hardly pinpoint at some primary schools where you have desktop, laptops, or tablets. So how do you expect those children to grow into ICT or catch up with their mates in other climes if we are not investing in technology?
Thank you very much.
And even for the teachers.
Yes. This is a 21st century education system, but Nigeria is not in the 21st century when it comes to education system. You cannot, at this point, you cannot underestimate the power of e-learning and digital infrastructure in education. The more you look away or shy away from it, the more problems you are expecting. As a case in view, I was just discussing with a colleague of mine recently about the WAEC proposal. And WAEC says by 2026, they are going to move 100% to CBT. That is a problem coming. Yes, and we have to be proactive rather than reactive. What we have experienced with JAM now, and if care is not taken, next year might be worse.
You're right.
Now,
okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, make your point.
Yeah. Now, my point is, when we go to schools, how many computers do we have in these schools? What is the relationship? How have we infused our curriculum to meet up with digitalized system? How have we digitalized our curriculum? Now, if we have not digitalized our curriculum, we have the paper curriculum. Now, some students have never seen a computer before. It's on the board. They taught them parts of the computer, a CPU, a monitor, and other. Then on the exam day, you want them to do CBT. They will struggle. They will struggle. They don't even know how to maneuver the system. Even the teachers that are supposed to teach them, some of them don't have this knowledge. They don't have this training. So we have to go back. We need a curriculum reform, as I've said. Then we have to digitalize our curriculum. We have to step up. Because that is where the world is right now.
Sulaimon, so sorry, Ajibola. So what you've just raised now, I saw an article this morning, and you know, again, somebody just said, and the title of the article, let me just read the title of the article so you know where I'm coming from. Now, the person says, they want to kill CBT before it reaches SSE, and JAMB was the warning shot. Meaning that, you know, in line with what you said, there could be a problem. So do you also, for one reason or the other, see a sabotage in what happened in JAMB, just so that we do not have a massive migration into CBT examination, CBT form of examination in all our examinations? Because again, like you said, WAEC and NECO have also expressed readiness to go into CBT examination. So for you, is it just about the fact that the students are not enlightened about the use of computer systems, or is it that the system, the Nigerian system in quote, is not just ready because of the racketeering and all of the issues surrounding examinations in Nigeria?
That's interesting. I have diagnosed the whole JAM situation. And funnily, I have a different perspective to the issue. Because, of course, when results are out like this, you know, there will be public outcry. People would say the teachers are not doing enough, the students are not serious, it's TikTok, social media, and all of those things. But I see a structural flaw with JAM.
Okay.
I don't think for any reason JAM should still continue to have or be a once-in-a-year exam.
Right.
JAM is an admission test. It's not a certificate exam.
Right.
So JAM should be flexible. It's too rigid.
Okay.
I think JAM should have
seasons,
tranches, series.
Okay.
maybe like 3 times in the year. JAMB does not have the infrastructure or capacity to conduct exam for about 2 million students at a go.
At a go.
So there would be glitches, there will be issues.
Okay.
But if the batches are scaled,
So just like we have the May, June WAEC
Exactly.
and the November, October, November GC,
that
so
is it.
JAMB could also look into...
could look into it,
Okay.
scale it.
Right.
If students have more opportunities, there are contingencies.
Right.
You would not have 2 million people applying for JAMB at
At the
a
same
go.
time. Right.
Because the fear is, if they miss it this time,
they have to wait
they
till
have
next
to wait
year.
another year.
Right.
And funny thing, there is failure. There will be failure. You can't rule out failure in examination.
True.
So why are we limiting their stakes? Because when students fail, it means they have to wait
For the whole
for the whole
year.
year. And technically, there is not supposed to be failure in JAMB. Let me explain to you as an expert. You would see that JAMB is over 400, right? Some schools will say cutoff mark 200.
200.
Some will say 150. Some go as low as 120.
Right.
So technically, there's no failure because somebody who has
Right.
200
so you
somewhere,
can seek admission,
you can seek
somewhere
admission
else.
elsewhere.
Right.
But then, I was talking about scaling it, right? But then, a student, for instance, who intends to study medicine and needs 300, unfortunately, for one reason or the other, maybe the student could have fallen ill on the exam day. Maybe the student could have encountered traffic issue on the way to anything could have happened. Now, that student, maybe after struggling to sit for the exam, had 298. Just 2 points. Why should that student wait another year to try again?
Try again. Right.
So you could have just tried again in another few months, 2-3 months. The brain will still be
Mentally,
fresh.
right.
Mentally, you will still be ready. Because waiting another year means you can do some other things. You will be hoping that, okay, when JAMB is 1 month, I will
I'll
start
start
preparing.
trying it.
Yeah,
I'll start preparing again.
preparing again.
Right.
So we have people who have taken JAMB for 5 times, 7 times. That means they've wasted 5 years or 7 years
Of their lives.
waiting again to take JAMB.
So this should be part of the reform that you think
Exactly.
JAMB can
I think
look
JAMB can
into.
look into. Then, as regards WAEC and NECO and CBT transition, I think they should begin how JAMB began.
Okay. Test rolling.
Test rolling. Ease us into it. Give the opportunity for schools who want to.
For failures like this.
Yes, then give up options.
Okay.
Some may
Some may
desire
not be ready.
paper-based.
Okay. And then,
Then
so it
Some
is not
CBT.
entirely
It
CBT.
is not entirely CBT. You can't just throw us into CBT. It's going to be a problem.
Right.
We have schools, even approved schools,
Right.
that do not have the facilities. They don't have the infrastructure for this
CBT.
CBT.
examination, Right.
So, but as time goes on, maybe the quality assurance would also make it
Step
a
into
point,
it.
step into it. Maybe after like 5-7 years, we'll be ready for 100% CBT.
So at the
But not
moment,
now.
we're not totally
We're not
ready.
totally ready.
Okay, we have said so much about governments at different levels now. Let's talk about the fault of parents and, of course, the student themselves. ICT is supposed to be a blessing,
Yes.
but some of the students, 24/7, they're on their gadgets, not reading. And when you don't read, when you don't prepare, you wouldn't expect any miracle to happen when you're writing your exams. And, of course, their parents would also pamper them, take them to special centers, of course, talk to their teachers. So how do we begin to change the orientation of these students and their parents as well?
We need to go back to how we used to promote reading culture. Yeah, because people no longer promote reading culture. Parents now ignore, or not many parents pay attention to their children's reading habits. It's important. Somebody said if you want to hide something from Africans, hide it in a book. You know, because Africans hardly read. And because we have the digital systems now, we are moving books online. Funnily, our students, when you expect them to be reading, they may be doing something else. So you can control it, but you cannot stop it. So my argument is that because there is a problem, and you know that this problem exists, you cannot ignore that problem and do things just leave things the way they used to be. So something has to give. Something has to change. Not many of our schools have standard libraries. Not many of our schools they don't even have the physical library, let alone digital libraries. So how do we want them to read?
Okay.
Not many of the schools on their timetable make room for reading. There used to be reading clubs. Where are they now? So the children can still be, we can still build them. We can still mold them to what we want. But we need to provide the enabling system for things to happen.
What about parents now?
Yeah, I mentioned parents promoting the children reading culture. You talked about parents corruption when it comes to. That's a big issue. I shouldn't lie. Yeah, that's a big, because it's something I'm in tune of. So I know what parents can do. In fact, if I want to give examples, will be here or there. We can only continue to appeal to the parents, because the corruption, however little they think it is affecting the system as a whole.
Right.
It's affecting the system as a whole. So we have parents who believe that they can get away with anything as far as they have money. And the education system should not be tolerated. So we come out now to complain about where we are, how we got here, but everyone should check themselves. Yeah, everyone should check themselves. If you go out and you see a heap of rubbish on the road, people will pass and you say, this is smelling. But how did it get there?
Right.
It's from the dirt from each of the rooms around that community, around that environment. So everyone should check themselves. If we actually want the education system to progress, we want things to move forward, we need to be honest with the education system.
All right, let's quickly look at the role school safety and school security also play in the standard of education. Again, if you're not safe and secure in an environment, teaching and learning will also be pretty difficult. Is this also a worry when it comes to the standard of education in Nigeria?
Yes, it is a worry. I should agree. We have reports, especially
Northern Nigeria.
the northern Nigeria. We have reports of children who are in school and unfortunately they're kidnapped or things happen to them. So when children don't feel safe in an environment, they would not learn.
Right.
Because they rather pay attention to what will keep them safe than the purpose for them being there.
Okay.
So there are so many things schools can do to ensure safety, part of which is, first, access control.
Okay.
Who goes in? Who goes out?
Okay.
Why are they going in? Why are they going out? It's not just about commending the Lagos State government. We can hardly see a school owned by Lagos State government that is not fenced.
Okay.
But step out of the state. Look around. There are schools on large amounts of land that are not fenced. Fencing is part of school security. That's access. Because if it's not fenced, intruders can come from any part of the school.
Okay.
So fencing is important. Access control, you have a security guard or security guards that ensure what goes in, what goes out. Yeah. Then the community has a role to play too. Like they say, the security is everybody's business. Yeah, everyone's business. So the community has a role to play. And I was going to talk about the PTA system and how that has eroded away now.
Right.
But that was playing a significant role in the standard of education in the past. Because when somebody sees something, somebody says something.
Right.
That's the thing. So we need to, I should mention again that circuit camera, CCTV,
Right.
is also very important in schools because that enables you to see around,
Okay.
so you know what's going on. Of course, there are so many private schools, or let me say standard private, because we have private schools and we have the standard ones. So the standard private schools who have spent so much to ensure that there's CCTV around their school, and that's helpful. Then another thing about CCTV is that I would always consider CCTV as a reactionary system. If you install a CCTV, ensure there's somebody monitoring it.
Okay.
You can employ somebody full-time to monitor it.
Right.
It's not when something happens, you now start going back,
Playing
let's
back.
record. When you play back, things might have, gone bad.
Right. So it's best to monitor.
It's best to monitor.
Okay, we cannot talk about standard of education in Nigeria without referring to access to education. In some parts of this country, people hardly have access to education, or they are not willing to go. And that would take me to the number of out-of-school children that we have. How do we salvage the situation or encourage those people in those communities where they are not encouraged, maybe because of their cultural background or religious belief, from not going to school?
Thank you very much, sir. As you have mentioned, in some parts of this country, it's part of their cultural inclination that they should not go to school. In fact, going to school is a waste of time for them. And that's so bad. Because like I said at the beginning, I said, we are grooming people from different sectors and we are placing them on the same level. So how would they meet up? A few years ago, there was a government in place in this country that adopted a system where you can hardly find children so tax for transportation, we have tax forces for other things. What happened to tax force for education? Yes. If you go out there, you will see children of school age roaming about, selling in traffic and all of it. So we can ensure that there is the policy. If you read through the Nigerian policy on education, you will see it there. You will see the penalty for parents. Funnily, the penalty is just a token, though, but that's because we don't usually update. But parents have a responsibility, and if this responsibility is not met, parents have a punishment under the law.
Okay.
But
who's going to punish the parents?
Who's going to punish the
Who's going to bail the cat?
That's the thing.
Right. Before we allow you to go, two questions I have. First, let's look at the issue of peer pressure and drug abuse. I know that this also may be connected with the issue around the social media, which you also alluded to earlier. So if we're to take a look in the standard of education.
Yes, it is. It is. And that takes me again to community-based system.
Okay.
Because school locations are different. School systems by location are different. There is one thing in the book as what is to be done. There is another thing is in what is applicable in the environment.
Okay.
So if everybody comes together, now by everybody I mean the community, the immediate society of the school, we can discourage as much as possible. We can discourage the use of drug abuse. We can discourage we can discourage truancy. We can discourage. I remember back then when I was in secondary school, we had something called School 1, School 2. Yeah. So if you are not, School 1 is the main school. If you are not within the walls of the school, you are in School 2. But then, even that School 2 was not a haven for drug abuse. But I can imagine what it will be now. Because, like I said, times are changing. So we have to ensure that measures we put appropriate, are put in place to meet up with the time. to meet up with the time. So then when it comes to peer pressure, when it comes to the influence of social media, we cannot roll it out. I do not encourage parents, allowing their children to have access to
mobile phones,
tablets, that is not controlled.
Okay.
There is access control for everything. There's a control. Even on
Cable TV.
There's control. But many of our parents will ignore it. Even if you want to open a Gmail, you can open a Gmail for a child. There is age limit. So we need to pay attention to these things because these things are there for a reason.
Right. Okay, Jibola, do you have a question? Okay, so finally, if you had, sport at the moment to change one thing or to move one thing forward in the education sector as we speak, what would that be?
Just one.
Just one. One immediate thing that you see as a ticking time bomb.
Our curriculum.
Okay.
It has to be changed.
Okay.
It has to be changed.
It has to be changed.
It has to be changed
to the trend, to meet up
with the trend. We cannot have lecturers in universities still using the notes they used 20 years ago. Because why should they change it when the curriculum is the same?
Okay.
You cannot have, secondary school teachers retaining, reusing, rewashing notes. You cannot have students. Okay, I was at a school where, they even tried because they have some e-facilities.
Okay.
But funnily, after you might have projected the notes, after you might have sent the notes to students, the students will still have to sit down and still write, still copy. It's time wasting. The world is moving at a fast pace. We should not be wasting time. The more we waste time on things, the worse they get.
Right.
So I think right now our curriculum should change.
All right. Okay, thank you so much, Sulaimon Olalekan Okewole, expert educator and Nigeria Digital Education Reforms Advocate. Thank you for finding time to be with us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right, that's the much take on this segment of the show. We took a quick break. When the conversation returns, Adebimpe will be here with her conversation.
The views expressed on this program do not represent that of the producer, management of Lagos Television, or the Lagos State Government. They remain the perspectives of those expressing them. Thank you for staying with Lagos Television.